Hey, everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in to This Is Why I'm Not Invited. My name is Nova Nebula, and this is going to be episode 17. Honestly, I can't even believe that we're at 17 so quickly. The time flies when you're really just having the best time of your life. Last week or a couple of days ago, I was actually asking some viewers basically what would they like to hear on this week's podcast, or even like just make some recommendation for topics. And a really big one came up. Now, this is a topic that I have personally encountered a lot in my journey, specifically because I tend to host a lot of events. I myself am queer and pansexual. My events are LGBTQ plus friendly, all of that good stuff. And one of the continuing topics or even questions that comes up a lot is essentially about bi men. The topic that we're going to talk about today is going to be about bisexual men in kink and swing communities. It's going to be from my perspective. Clearly, I am not a bisexual man, so work with me here, bear with me, but I'm going to be blunt. This isn't about theory, it's about real people that I've talked to that are bisexual themselves, that are in the kink and the swing community, people that are learning how to navigate the spaces, trying to, get out there while unfortunately facing a stigma of a lifestyle that is insanely heteronormative. One of the biggest things I do want to kind of start off with is that, yes, bisexual men are everywhere. They are not a fantasy, they are not a fetish. They're not some curiosity for everyone else's entertainment. I feel like the stigma with bisexual men is very, very big, so much so that certain people don't feel comfortable identifying themselves unless it's a trusted group of friend, because unfortunately for them they can kind of fall into those categories of being a fetish or a fantasy, and that's honestly not fair to them at all. It doesn't matter where you are in terms of your gender or your sexuality. At the end of the day, we have to realize that people in the scene are people. They are real. They have dreams and boundaries and desires and identities. The spaces that they enter, the places that they're trying to join, unfortunately, they can get a little bit messy and complicated. I know it's really weird to say this, but in the lifestyle community, the swing community, and the BDSM community, it's a very heteronormative space. It's really weird for me to say that because, like, hey, alternative lifestyle, we're doing, risque things, quote unquote. It's more taboo. Ooh. You would honestly think that bisexual men, to be specific, would be very, very welcome to these spaces. And unfortunately, they're not. And it's just crazy. It's crazy to see the uncomfort, I guess, and the direct, I guess, display of heteronormative behaviors in a very alternative, taboo, if you would, lifestyle. Unfortunately, one of the very common trends that I have heard about as an event organizer is the unwelcoming atmosphere for bisexual men at other events by other event hosts. And it's kind of just, for me, like, that's unfair. So I want to talk about it. Let's see if we can actually identify the problem, the nuance, and basically talk about opening up more opportunities for bisexual men in our space, in our kink spaces, in the swing spaces. If we don't do this, unfortunately, this is going to allow for the misrepresentation by other people, or even worse, for them to be ignored. And that's what we don't want. We want to include everybody. I do want to mention that basically being bisexual or bisexuality itself, it's not somebody being confused. They like what they like. It's not an experiment. We don't grow out of it. If anything, sometimes we lean harder into it, and then later on we discover that we like other things as well. It's not something that we fetishize or we should be fetishizing. And unfortunately, with bisexual men, I have seen a lot of bisexual men be fetishized and then also be kind of roped into somebody else's fantasy. Men who identify as bisexual constantly get hit with that kind of narrative. Like they're somebody's fetish factory. They're there to just pop out, and fulfill someone else's idea of who they are and what they should be. I am not sure about you, but I've definitely seen it around me a lot where people will start making assumptions, people are whispering or making jokes. Oh, they're experimenting. He's just, doesn't want to admit that he's gay. He's just curious. But none of those are an accurate or true reflection of reality. Bisexual men are real people. We have to stop turning them into a fetish or a fantasy, and they have real sexual and social identities. From some of my friends, they've personally told me that their bisexual experience varies depending on who they're with in real life. When they are with a woman, people treat them like straight men. They hand them beers, give them firm handshakes, invite them over, all the traditional stereotypical heterosexual things that men do, right? Yet, when they're dating a man, suddenly they become gay. They're not invited back to certain areas. People make weird comments or stare at them weird in like changing areas at the gym. And suddenly it becomes like this taboo, like, oh my gosh, this is a man and he's bisexual. He must be attracted to me. I don't want him to look at me because I'm not gay. It's crazy. I can't believe that people actually jump to those assumptions, but it happens and that needs to stop. For some people, when they discover that a man is bisexual, they will just put that man in a different box. And it's basically a perception of what they think bisexual men are like. And by putting them into that category, that's not actually correct because they're making a biased assumption on what their knowledge is. And that's a lot of inconsistencies. It shapes everything, unfortunately. And for some people, it can actually shape their trust, their access, and as well as how they are perceived to express themselves. Something that we really need to take a step back and understand is that research literally backs this up. Bisexual men, they report higher levels of anxiety and monitoring stress than gay or straight peers. The reason for this is largely due to the type of stigma that they face, as well as the identity erasure. So, again, people are putting them in boxes that they think those men should be in, and it's actually causing these men to have extreme stress. Another big, I guess, step backwards or a really big obstacle within the community itself is that there are certain communities that don't recognize the legitimacy of being bisexual, and they're actually adding to the problem and making it worse. This is something that I feel kink and swing spaces should pay more attention to and take a little bit more time to address what's happening and try to make space. When it comes to questioning somebody's sexual identity and basically kind of trying to gatekeep, if you would, it's erasure, right? And it doesn't just affect social perception, it actually bleeds into participation itself. Bi men often get excluded from play. They're left out of swaps, they're fetishized, and sometimes the worst thing is like they're actually used to fulfill a fantasy or a curiosity. Acceptance without respect, that isn't inclusion. It's instrumentation, and people really need to understand the difference between these two things. One of the things that absolutely kills me personally the most is that essentially there's this massive gendered reality where bisexual women are almost always exclusively fetishized and even celebrated. Space is easier for them to enter, they have full access. They're more than welcome at swinger places, swinger events, swinger lifestyle parties, as well as kink spaces. But when we start talking about bisexual men, they're scrutinized, questioned, and sometimes they're actually straight out policied, right? Desire isn't equally tolerated, and participation is not as equally welcomed or celebrated. This is unfair. And even with all this unfairness, it's how a lot of the kink and swing communities operate, unfortunately. One of the things we also have to realize, and it sucks, is that gatekeeping does not just happen from our straight gender or our straight folks, right? Gay communities are also possible and capable and are potentially and have been gatekeeping as well. They question legitimacy, they put people in categories, they're also dismissive. And unfortunately for bisexual men, I feel like they have to constantly prove something to someone. They have to prove that they fit in somewhere, anywhere. And that is just an exhausting thing to do continuously, especially in a space or a lifestyle where everyone is supposed to be inclusive and included. Bisexual men are just like everybody else. They want to get out there, socialize, mingle, talk to somebody, and also have the ability to play and connect with people on a deeper level and not just be someone's fetish. Kink scenes are also just as guilty as swinger scenes. Essentially, it adds a different layer of that, putting somebody into a category or a box, right? People assume roles, and basically, when they assume a person's role, whether it be gender or sexual preference, they unfortunately place a label on them as well, and that actually reflects their perception of that person. Tops have to be masculine, bottoms have to be submissive. Then they try to assign sexual orientation based on the roles that are present or the roles that they put these people into. Bisexual men, unfortunately, get just chucked into boxes that they didn't choose. That is an example of erasure, as well as how this is a perfect example of how this allows the person or the bisexual men to express themselves. When we do this, either knowingly or unknowingly, that's actually very harmful. Not just emotionally harmful, but it's also harmful socially. Participation is about consent, negotiation, and trust. First and foremost, safety, right? We've talked about this before. If a whole community chooses to not see your identity clearly, you're negotiating under misinformation. That's why visibility and recognition are very important and they're not optional. It's actually a really important structural component to the lifestyle. Swing spaces, in particular, are full of assumptions. Profiles often say no men with men, couples only looking for a woman only to swap, no single men, no men, things like that. Bisexual men exist outside of that expectation, and that expectation specifically actively erases them. It's subtle, but it's there. It affects safety, comfort, and access. Kink communities, they're slightly different. Fetish does attract diversity, right? But even there, there's assumptions that linger. People can also interpret a bisexual man's role through the binary lens, okay? When we do this, that actually erases nuance. And this makes someone cautious about being able to express themselves or express their desire, or even just attending particular spaces. Biphobia is real, and I hate it because it sucks. Because, again, a lot of the time it's very gendered based. You have bisexual women that are constantly talked about and fetishized and videotaped and invited and celebrated. But when you have a bisexual man present, everybody gets quiet. There's no celebration, there's no laughing and smiling. And it makes people uncomfortable, which is crazy because, again, how are you going to be okay with the sexual identity of one person but not the other? That's very exclusionary. Biphobia, unfortunately, exists everywhere, both inside and outside of the queer communities. It manifests as assumptions as well as exclusions, and also there's microaggressions that we haven't even begun to talk about. People will tend to call bisexual men confused, greedy, things like that, and basically hold them to these ridiculous stereotypes that are not real at all. And unfortunately, that's something we gotta fix. Another thing that happens with this external, I guess, ideals or, people putting people in boxes is the internal pressure that bisexual men face. They constantly negotiate who they are. They're looking for identity validation. Also, there's lots of stress and anxiety because they're not sure who they can talk to, what events they can go to without being judged or compartmentalized. And this causes, tons of social anxiety on top of having stress and anxiety. Being erased or fetishized is not harmless. And it's a really big mental load that is being placed onto other people that they didn't ask for. Communities need to step it up and do our best to include bisexual men into our spaces because they are people and they need to be seen and treated respectfully. Inclusion itself is not passive. It isn't just rejecting people, it's active recognition. It's adjusting your policies, creating accessible spaces, and ensuring that bisexual men can come to the space and define themselves. They're not being put into a box or into a category by somebody else and their reception. It is basically them expressing themselves as they want to be expressed. Their identity is their own, and it is able for them to talk about, to express. Their identity is for them to express. It is not ours to police. After having spoken to a few of my friends about this, it's really crazy to me to have to understand that bisexual men have to switch how they present themselves depending on where they are. Either they have to be more visibly bi, sometimes they have to be quieter, sometimes they have to be cautious. It's not pretending for them, and it sucks because some of them express to me that they feel like they have to survive the space. And I just can't believe that we're still doing that in 2025. Every community has its own assumptions, its own rules, and that's fine, right? But realistically, we have to stop asserting identity and allowing people to identify themselves. It's a skill, unfortunately, that bisexual men develop to learn out of necessity because the tension that exists there between authenticity and safety is a huge constant for them. And again, we're in 2025. What are we doing? Why are we like this? It's something that we really don't discuss. We talk about this privately. Like, I'll talk about this stuff with my friends. They'll give me their points of view. They'll tell me they went to a new place, a new party, a new event, and they immediately felt like they were out of place, or they were told, hey, this isn't that kind of space. Identity is fluid, but the external pressure to conform is heavy and oppressive, and that needs to be something that we address as a community. There's lots of other different things that actually come into play with bisexuality in men as well. Age, race. So it's not just a single layer, it now has depths. And unfortunately, those particular things can lead to invisibility. A young bisexual man in an older scene faces a different kind of scrutiny than vice versa. Someone of color may navigate assumptions that, other people don't have to worry about. Intersectionality, all of this stuff, this affects access, trust, acceptance, and this happens within our communities, right? It's not just about who you're attracted to. It's about how others perceive you and how they treat you. All of those things together, they mix, and essentially that affects access, it affects trust, it affects acceptance in both the kink and the swing communities. Unfortunately, it's not just who you're attracted to, it's also about how others perceive you and how they treat you. Understanding this is crucial for anyone who wants to be truly inclusive. A lot of assumptions about bisexual men, unfortunately, lead to miscommunications around consent. People assume attraction equals access, and that's a really big, horrible, and dangerous misunderstanding. Consent isn't optional. Identity doesn't grant entitlement. When a bisexual man sets a boundary, ignoring it isn't just rude, it's literally unsafe. The worst part, many in the community don't even realize that they themselves are perpetuating the harm because of that unconscious bias. Clear communication, every single person, every single time, is Very important because this protects everybody at all times. Things that we should do to try to offer and create more inclusive spaces for bisexual men is to literally shut up and listen. Listen to them, okay? Watch them. Stop projecting whatever assumptions you have about this person onto them. We have to respect identity, honor boundaries as always, and create a space without policing desire or fetishizing them. We don't erase them and we don't gossip about someone's orientation. Your job isn't to educate bisexual men, okay? Our job is to make our community safe enough that education about this is not even necessary. Inclusion starts with us, with awareness, and awareness starts with humanity. One of the cool things is that some bisexual men actually run events, which is great, right? Because they're out there, they're in control, they're making sure that the space is safe and inclusive. They have people who are DJs, they host play parties, and there's even bisexual men that lead workshops. Unfortunately, even though they've done so many great things and they're event organizers and educators, they can still have their identities overlooked. Visibility matters, and leadership is about more than just being seen. It's about shaping a culture where inclusion is baked into it. It's not optional. Bisexual men in leadership challenge the social norms, and this is great because this opens the door to push conversations forward. It makes the spaces safer for everyone. They often do it while fighting stereotypes, as well as assumptions and criticism. Again, we talked about those layers earlier. It's a balancing act for them that's unnecessary, and that deserves recognition. So let's talk about some of my events and some of the questions that I get in PMs about bisexual men. I throw a lot of different types of events, right? Very kinky. With that being said, it's kind of a mixture of like lifestyle, swinger, kink parties. Totally fine. I will get a lot of private messages from various men that are bisexual, obviously, and they'll be like, hey, I see that you say your party is inclusive, but is it actually inclusive? And I don't know what to say to that. I mean, obviously I do. I say, yes, I'm inclusive. And then one of the things that just, it makes me kind of get in my feelings, I'll respond with, yes, it's inclusive. Everyone's welcome. Respect gender identity, respect sexualities, understand consent. No means no, all of that. And then they'll send a second message and say, is the space open and inclusive of bisexual men? And this makes my kinky heart sad. It makes my kink heart sad because this lets me know that this particular person has been in this space before where they looked at an event or they have gone to events where it says that it's LGBTQ friendly. And when they actually show up, it's not. They feel excluded. They have their boundaries pushed and tested. People assume that a bisexual man is simply there to fulfill the heterosexual desire of the party. And that's just crazy. Again, I can't tell you how many people have messaged me repeatedly asking, like, hey, is this all inclusive? Can everyone come? Are all sexual orientations welcome? I'll say yes. And then they shoot right back with, I'm a bisexual man. Is it okay for a bisexual man to play at your event with another man? And again, absolutely, the answer is yes. Absolutely yes, right? But the fact that they have to ask the question more than once is something that just makes, again, my kinky heart sad. There are so many spaces that are heteronormative, and that's absolutely fine too. 100%. Don't let me let you think that I mean that in a bad way. For all of the event spaces, the dungeons, the studios, the swingers parties, the resorts, every single place that does say they are LGBTQ plus friendly, we need to truly be LGBTQ plus friendly. We have to include the space where bisexual men can come and basically play at their leisure and not have the social anxiety or the stress of being put into somebody else's box. present because, again, they want to connect just as much as we want to connect. So, to my listeners out there and to all my bisexual men, understand that you deserve respect. You deserve a space where you feel included. You deserve recognition, period. Desire is not entitlement. Identity is never optional. And communities, whether kink, swing, someplace in between, we have a responsibility to see people as actual people, not assumptions, not stereotypes, and not experiments. If that makes anybody uncomfortable, then you should definitely sit with that and ask yourself some questions and maybe get some therapy. Not everything that you don't like is unsafe. Not everything that makes you uncomfortable is unsafe. Not every person or everything that is different from what you're used to requires policing. We have to do better to do better. We have to do better to be more inclusive. We need to have better structure for maybe the outline of how we represent our space. I feel at this point, one of the things that my venue is known for is for literally being a non heteronormative space. I pride myself on that. Definitely a huge queer space. I pride myself on being inclusive of everybody. A lot of bisexual men come to my space because they feel comfortable. They don't feel stressed or pressured. They don't feel like they're being ignored or erased. And that's definitely something that all of the kink spaces and swing spaces should definitely try to, if that's what we're going for. Because honestly, it's the end of 2025. It is literally December 21st, 2025. Why are we not being inclusive? Why are we still doing this bad behavior? So, well, that's my thought. That's my take. Thank you for the topic submission. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment, drop a like, all that good stuff. Well, I will definitely see you next week. I hope everyone has a happy holiday. Happy solstice, by the way. I totally forgot to start off with that. It is solstice. Happy solstice, right? Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. Happy Kwanzaa. Whatever you celebrate, be merry. If not, drink, enjoy, party, talk to people, get out there, stay warm. It's cold where I'm at. Well, thank you very much for tuning in for episode 17 of This Is Why I'm Not Invited. This is the one and only Nova. I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye. Hydrate, drink water.